Hi, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at elleruss.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, today my guest is Angie of Not Your Average Runner. She's a certified running and mindset coach who wants to live in a world where everyone is free to feel fit and fabulous at any size. Since 2013, she has been helping larger-bodied women who have never felt athletic start running so that they can feel empowered and confident. She's also the host of the popular podcast, Not Your Average Runner, as well as 3 books on running, which are all part of her mission to help 1 million women start running. So if you'd like to start running with Jill, visit notyouraverage-runner.com to download your free jump start plan today. Hey, Jill, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we've known about each other for a long time. I actually was on your podcast, and it was one of the best interviews ever. And I actually put it on my website in my press section. So everybody, or media section. So everybody, if you want to check that out, please visit my website. But you and I have a mutual friend / we're fangirls of Cassie Parks.
Yes. I love Cassie. She's the best.
I love Cassie. She is so great. And she's going to be on the show as well. Never tire of talking to her. Let's first just talk out about how did you get into running to begin with? I mean, most people don't think of, when you're larger body, that you start off with running,
Yeah. Well, I just realized that this year is my 25th anniversary of being a runner, which kind of blows my mind.
Wow.
So I started running when I was in my late 20s, and it was because I thought, if I want to lose weight, I have to burn a lot of calories. And so running is the best way to do that. So like most people, like most women, I started running to lose weight. I figured out that running actually doesn't help you lose weight all that much, but I sort of fell in love with it along the way, just as an activity that helped me connect with myself and just feel really confident and empowered. And so I stuck with it for that reason. And it is usually pretty surprising. I always I call it the look when somebody says, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a running coach." And they're like, "Oh, good for you." Because it's confusing because you don't think of larger bodied women as runners. So how
often do you run?
Usually 3 times a week. I try not to run. Sometimes I'll do 4 times a week if I'm training for a longer distance event, but I like 3 times a week of running and then twice a week of strength training. And then, the rest of the time I'll just go for a walk or something.
So I'm sure you've gotten this question, but this would be the sort of objection or something someone would make, which would be like, well, you started running, but you're still a, larger bodied woman. Did you have any decisions this way? Why haven't you? Why hasn't running helped? Right. There's always going to be someone that's going to be like, right. Questioning why maybe you've stayed the same shape, and not that you have to be different. Right. But I'm assuming that that's kind of like a shitty objection people make.
I get that question I wouldn't say frequently, but I do get people say you run so much, how come you're not skinny? And I always just respond, because running is a terrible weight loss plan. Right. That's it. If you want to change your body, you got to do more than run 3 times a week. So, I do get that question a lot, and it just kind of makes me laugh because it makes me realize how programmed we are by the diet and fitness industry. And so I try to use that as a chance for education rather than to be insulted or annoyed, even though sometimes I do get annoyed.
Absolutely. Well, larger bodied women have been featured in more commercials and advertising over the years. I've even noticed in TV and film, part of the reason I ended up hypothyroid and a total mess was, being in the acting industry. And at that time, really being okay, I'd be in a casting director's office and I'd hear the casting director talk to an agent, and she'd say your client's at an 8, I need her at a 2. You just knew that you had to kind of be this Jessica Biel athletic image. Now it's gotten so much better. It has gotten so much better over the years. And then including the advertising. What do you think of that movement?
What do I think of? Can you say that again?
the movement and the movement with advertising sort of featuring more fuller bodied women over the years, and how that's sort of become, a little bit of a transformation within advertising.
Yeah. Okay. So I have many thoughts on that. Some conflicting, but on the surface, I think it's awesome because as a larger bodied woman, when I see somebody of my size or my shape featured in advertising, I think to myself like, oh, look, right. Like I feel that connection, and I'm usually obviously more interested in the brand. What I have found though, as I've been larger bodied my whole life. And what I've noticed is there are some brands that are very, very sincere and earnest in their desire to serve women of all shapes and sizes. And then there are others who are like, oh, there's a lot of money to be made in that market. Let's pay some lip service to it. So I think, I always come to any kind of advertising with the benefit of the doubt. But when I do my research, it's often I find that like, they're not necessarily living the message that they're trying to present, but there are brands out there that for sure are. Not sure if that answered your question.
No, it totally did. I get you. You
Yeah.
kind of look at the intention behind some of these companies, and you kind of feel like resonate with some, and others you kind of know it's just a kind of a sham.
Yeah,
sham
I think
operation.
that's it, right? And like when I recognize that I have a ton of privilege in this world as a white woman, as somebody who, was born and raised in a affluent society. But I mean, fat women are marginalized for sure. And so we kind of like, I look at everything with a bit of a skeptical eye sometimes. And I think like, okay, that's great. You've got like fat women in your marketing, but are you really walking the walk or not? And so I always hope for the best, but I'm not usually surprised when it doesn't live up. But like I said, there are plenty of advertisers out there that are doing a great job. It's just, there's more work to be done.
Yeah, and you're not out there being like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to run and lose weight. This is about empowering people, right? And it also is, introducing a nice health factor and an empowerment, practice into people's lives. Not to be a downer, not to get into this stuff, but if people are listening and they're larger bodied, I'm sure they'd like to hear from your perspective some of the BS you've heard over the years, either people said about you, what people think. Moving through the world as a larger bodied woman, you've been this way, like you said, your whole life. What have you come across? What are some of these things that really stand out to you? I'm sure we could do like an entire podcast on it, but fucking 2 hours on that. But, what are some of the more like ones that stick in there, or that, come out when you're coaching with people that resonate with your clients?
So I think it's interesting because my experience of the world as a fat woman has shifted a lot over time. And I think when I was younger and I didn't have necessarily the level of confidence that I do right now, I was looking at everything through the lens of, are you trying to insult me? What do you mean by that? Right. And so I kind of would read things into what other people had to say that I would take as insulting or demeaning. And now that I just kind of have much more of a sense of myself and I have much more confidence in how I show up, and I really don't give a fuck if somebody, thinks I'm fat. Like I experience the world differently. I don't see everything as an insult or a slight that I might have seen that way 20 years ago. And I don't think that I don't think that there's less people saying things. It's just that I feel like I almost have these like lenses on that, like, oh, if you're saying something that doesn't agree with my own self-image, I just can't even absorb it. I can't even take it on. And so I think that's one thing that I try to teach the women that I work with, is that the way you think about yourself impacts how you're going to experience the world. And so working on your own self-image and your own confidence is the key to not getting insulted or not getting derogatory comments, because people are going to say shit. Like, it doesn't really matter, whether you're skinny or whether you're fat or anything in between. Like, somebody's always going to have an opinion of you that doesn't feel good to hear. But like, when your opinion of yourself is so solid, you almost can't even hear the noise.
Yeah. Yeah. What about this objection? Because I can see this. Well, it's come up, I think, in some of the advertising with larger bodied women, is people would say, well, you know what? That's not promoting an image of health, because being that overweight's not healthy. And, therefore, like, we shouldn't be glorifying this. Now, granted, we've glorified the other way. Got anorexic models walking, passing out on fucking runways. And, by the way, just if people listening don't know this, there is such a thing as skinny fat. Okay. You can be pre-diabetic, totally a disaster, an inflamed mess, and have a perfect body. And I always say, to people when I've talked about thyroid or any kind of health stuff is, you look at someone, you go, oh man, I want her body. I'd be like, I don't know, check her fucking blood work. You might not want it. But what do you say to that? Where people are like, well, I guess I would say, well, first, like, do you have any more designs or care about losing weight? And then, or losing body fat. And then what about that objection to, hey, that's not healthy though. And then running with a larger body is going to bring stress on your joints. All of those type of arguments. I'm sure you've heard them. What do you have to say?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, the easiest one for me to dispel usually is like, if you're overweight and you're running, you're going to harm your joints, because that's actually like the exact opposite is true, because high impact exercise is great for your bones. It's great for your body. And so by becoming a runner when you're in a larger body, you're actually giving your joints and your ligaments and your tendons and your muscles like the chance to be even stronger. And where there's this fallacy that like, oh, if you run, you're going to destroy your knees. Well, first of all, I know a lot of people that have had knee replacements and not a single one of them has ever been a runner. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But also like the reason you might get injured if you're overweight and you're running is not because of the running. It's because of, imbalances and weaknesses in your muscles, right? It's a lack of strength. So I just say like, hey, if you're going to be a runner, whether you're larger bodied or not, get your ass in the gym and start lifting some heavy shit so that your body is ready for that repetitive motion. So I always think like, that's always an easy objection for me to dispel. Cause I'm like, oh, but you're just wrong. Right. But as far as like this concept of, glorifying obesity, like nobody's, and I've heard people say this before and I'm like, I'm confused. Like nobody's glorifying obesity. We're just all trying to be like, feel good about ourselves without requiring weight loss for us to feel good. Right. And so nobody's saying like, hey, you should aspire to be 200 pounds overweight. You should just aspire to fucking love yourself in the body you have right now. And then if you lose weight or you don't lose weight, like you still get to have a great opinion of yourself. And I think that's what most of the detractors from the body positivity movement are confused about. Cause I look at Lizzo, people are like, oh, she glorifies obesity. I'm like, no, she glorifies self-confidence.
That's right.
That's it. So,
and I always used to love that when I would see, here I was, when I was having my weight issues and stuff with hypothyroidism at the time, I had a body that maybe some larger bodied women would laugh at me saying, but for myself, I was overweight and didn't feel comfortable in my body. It was also just kind of riddled with horrible symptoms too. It wasn't just the weight.
Yeah.
But I remember like I'd be on, somewhere at the beach or whatever, and I'd see some really large woman. She had like a tube top on, no shame, walking around. And I was like, man, she's confident as fuck over there. Like, that's just, that's the ultimate really, is just having no shame about who you are and your body, embracing that. You're not just teaching people how to run. There's a lot of mindset stuff here. So let's get into that. Let's talk about some of your clients, some of the people you've worked with and their issues with self-image. And some of those, maybe some stories about some 180 turnarounds, but I'd like to hear yours first. Like when you went to finally accept yourself and love yourself in the body you're in.
Yeah. I think like that's a process for sure. It's not like one day I woke up and I was like, all right, good. We're just going to love this body. I mean, it's a process that I remind myself of frequently because we do constantly get bombarded with messaging that, and it's not obvious messaging. It's just very subtle messaging that, oh, I should be striving to look different than I am. And so there's plenty of days where I wake up and I think, oh God, this body again. But I consciously remind myself that that's not how I want to think. And then there's other days I wake up and I'm like, ooh, this body again. Yeah. Right. So it's a journey. And for my clients, I actually have clients that are runners in larger bodies. I have clients that are runners in what most people would say is like a conventionally acceptable body as well, and everything in between. But one thing that I've noticed as a consistency between the women I work with is that it really doesn't matter what your body size is. Mm-hmm. You can still have very critical thoughts and and just feel terrible about it, even if you have a body that somebody else would just die to have. Like basically like what you just said before, that you yourself were in a body that other people would have been like, oh my God, I'd love to have her body. And you're like, yeah, well, it doesn't feel real good right now. So that's like one of the commonalities that I work on with my clients, is how to sort of like accept that you probably are already always going to have some sort of self-criticism, but that you don't have to believe it. You don't have to like buy into it. And you don't have to like wallow in it, that you can step away and choose differently on purpose.
What about the concept of, a lot of people have this, doesn't matter, skinny, fat, whatever, is the whole like, well, I don't want to start dating until I lose the weight, or until and a lot of like larger people might have this when they're on a weight loss journey. Or again, it could be like an anorexic who's at home who still thinks they're fat and they won't go out because they're embarrassed, whatever, that kind of like shame, or presenting yourself, or going for a dream, but then being like, and we both know this through our, like universal law understanding of you do the thing, you don't wait, right? You don't wait until the time is right. Like there's someone for everyone now, like with dating, or there's, don't wait to go on that trip just because you can't fit into that bikini quite yet. Go on the damn trip. So what are some of those, if you could highlight or to sort of expand on that kind of concept?
Okay. Well, first I have to tell you a quick story that's going to make you laugh, because my ex-husband and I, and then I'll tell you like my thoughts on that. But my ex-husband and I, we got divorced, and I guess I was 49. I was 49 when we got divorced. We've been married about 12 years. And I thought to myself, oh shit, what am I going to do now? Right? Like, look at me, I'm fat. Like, am I ever going to like find somebody else? And I had that thought for a hot minute. And then I was like, yeah, I'm fat, but I'm fabulous. Like, and so I signed up for Tinder, 49 years old, signed up for Tinder, and I started dating. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a fat girl and I'm doing really well on Tinder. Like, like so many dudes like lined up to go on dates. And I told myself I was going to go on 50 first dates before I turned 50.
By the way, one of my favorite movies, 50 First Dates.
I know, right? So I set out to do that, and I had about 9 months to do it. And so I just started dating like crazy. I met some really amazing people. I'm actually still friends with some of them. And then I met the dude, like the love of my life. I think he was date number 17. And I kept dating for a while afterwards. And I got to like 26. And then he and I talked, and he's like, maybe we make this, maybe you don't go to 50. I'm like, all right. So we're married now, like fast forward 4 years and we're married. But I want
to point out that was a pretty quick process from, shit, where am I gonna, what? Fuck it. Let me try Tinder. And then like, there you go. So that's just proof right there. The mindset is everything.
It really, really is, because I so many women I talk to that are in a similar situation. They're like, I couldn't possibly go on online dating, or I'm too fat, or I'm too this. I'm like, fuck that. Like there's a person out there for everyone. And you're never going to find that person if you're like, oh no, I have to like lose the weight first, or I have to do this first. Or so I think like the thing that I've learned for sure, and this is, something I teach in my classes, is that the circumstances of your life are not what makes you feel good. They're not what, they're not like important, right? It's what you make your circumstances mean. And so I could have made my circumstances, 49 years old, fat, divorced, mean that my life was over. And I'm like, that is unacceptable to me. I decided to make it mean that my life is just beginning. And I'm going to try all these things to see what happens, to find, maybe I find love, maybe I don't, but at least I'm going to like meet some great people along the way. And I'll tell you, like in the process of deciding that I was going to go on 50 first dates in the space of about 9 months, I had to swipe right on a lot of people. And it like, I had a spreadsheet. I kept the data. I was like, all right, for every 10 guys I swipe right on, one of them like is a match. And then for every 10 guys that I match with, maybe one of them.
You're doing like statistics and spreadsheets on this shit?
100%. I wanted to make it as neutral as possible. Right. And so I didn't, you can make your circumstances mean whatever you want. And I think that's what drives the quality of your life, is what you make everything mean. And I just choose to not make it mean that I suck. And I choose to make everything mean that I'm amazing.
Yeah. I hope everyone's listening to that level of confidence, because It's really within. It doesn't come from anyone else's opinion or the circumstances of your life. It's how you truly decide to, like you said, your perspective on the circumstances. And, there, I've spoken with Ariel Ford a couple of times, Soulmate Secret, amazing author. And, there's a million stories about like the guy with one leg, and he thinks
Yeah.
who's going to want me. And then there you go. Bethany Hamilton in Soul Surfer, the movie, which I love, based on her book. She got her arm bitten off by a shark at age 13. And there's a scene in that movie that really warms my heart because it's like she's with her mom and she says, like, who's going to want me?
Oh,
And she's like, you're smart and you're beautiful and you're wonderful and somewhat, someday or whatever, right? And cut to go check out Bethany Hamilton's husband. Pretty, pretty big snack right there. And she's doing great and her life is even better as a result of that situation. But again, I think whether it's like being overweight or whether it's having a chronic condition, I had it too when my arms got injured. I was like, who the hell is ever going to want me? And I think when that thought comes in, oof, that is so stifling to what you can create. And it really wasn't until I got over that, right, that I felt so much more confident. And, that's the chapter 6 in my second book about that story. But yeah, there's someone for everyone out there. There was even a story about a guy who got his legs blown off in the Boston Marathon. But like somehow when he went to the hospital that day, there was a visiting nurse and they got to know each other, fell in love. And to this day, he would be like, I'm glad I got my legs blown off because I met the love of my life. He would never even take that back. He's like, I'd do it all again. I'd get my legs blown off. If I hadn't gotten blown off, it would never led me to her. So even what seems like a horrible, like that's an extreme example. You got to live now. Right. And also too, there's someone for everyone, in talking about dating, at least, talking about those 51st dates, there's someone like I've had people who maybe like I reached out to online and they were like, oh my gosh, your profile is great. But you know what? I prefer tall women. Nothing wrong with that. Like, hey, great. I know you like your preferences. There's some people that just love dating Asian women or whatever. We all are allowed to have our preferences. And there are also people that love and are attracted to full-bodied women, just as it's the opposite too. So they're out there and you're really proof of that on that story after your divorce. I love that. I love that so much.
I should add too, this is the part that like always blows everybody's minds. My husband is 14 years younger than me too. So not only,
ooh, I like it.
And not only did I meet like this amazing person, but like, my God, he's not even 40 yet. he's going to be 40 next year. And I'm just like, what is happening? Right? Like that's what happens when you shift your brain from the thought that you shared earlier, who's gonna want me now, to who wouldn't want me, right? Or
yes.
It's just like the mental piece is just everything.
I love that. Like, who wouldn't want me? I'm amazing. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Or, like I talk about in my book, and I've spoken about it elsewhere, where I had a friend who was going into a date and they had a 2-hour conversation with the girl and really liked her and was really excited about meeting her. And before he went to the date, he said, I hope she likes me. And I'm like, nope, you're not going to go into that date with that mindset. It's you hope you like her. You hope she's good enough for you to even ask on a second date. This is about you and what you think of her. You've talked to her for 2 hours. Don't give her that much fucking credit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely. That's like the perfect turnaround. I hope I like her. And I think, because dating is such an audition, right? It's not, you're not like trying to get somebody else to like you. You're trying to see if they're a good fit for you. It's like you're interviewing them for a job, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're hiring somebody, you don't go into the interview thinking, oh my gosh, I hope they like me enough to come work for me. You're like, no, fuck that. You're like, I hope I like them enough to want to hire. So it really is just about like shifting your perspective to something that, drives you to feeling confident instead of, I don't know, needy, whatever the word is.
Yeah. Or, oh, I'm just lucky this person accepted me. It's like, no.
Oh my God.
All those kind of things. Let's talk a little bit about mindset in terms of creating your own reality, in terms of manifestation. I know you've got some probably good personal stories. What are some stories you can think of where you did shift your mindset and then that thing happened, the experience, obviously the dating one and meeting your husband is one of them. What are some others that can inspire the audience to sort of get into changing around this mindset, being aware of our thoughts and purposely intending?
Oh my gosh. So I have like lots of I think little examples of doing that through, like I'll be, there's been many times when I've been like driving to a crowded parking lot and I'll just be like, oh, I'm not going to have any problem finding parking. And then bam,
Yep.
parking spot shows up right when I need it. But I think, I think overall, I use it a lot in the context of long distance running because, I'm thinking back to when I was in marathon training a couple years ago, and it was the first time I'd ever, run farther than 13 miles, farther than a half marathon. And I noticed on every long training run, if I had thoughts before I started the run of, oh God, this is going to be so hard. Oh, I hope I finish this run. I hope I don't get hurt, right? If I had all of these, very similar to, I hope she likes me kind of thoughts like, oh, I hope this goes well.
Mm-hmm.
When I was thinking like that, those runs were just painful and uncomfortable and much slower. And if I spent time before a training run, and I did this before my 20-mile run, if I just spent time quietly, just sort of visualizing the run playing out the way I wanted to and how I was going to feel and how I was going to think throughout the entire run, if I spent that time in 10 minutes, right? It wasn't like I had to spend hours and hours in meditation, like without fail, those runs were so much better. So it like, that intentional
mental rehearsal really is what
that's exactly it, which is what Cassie teaches a ton of that, right? To her clients and to her athletes. It really was. So like that mental rehearsal for me, I think is probably one of the biggest examples of creating the reality that I want, because when you're on a long training run, like you can suffer or you can not suffer. Like your body's going to feel the same probably no matter what you do, but the suffering is like the choice that you make in your mind. And so setting myself up for success, like, oh, I'm not going to suffer. I'm going to enjoy this regardless of whether it feels difficult or achy or I'm sore or whatever. Like I don't have to suffer. So I think that's probably the biggest example in my life of where I've created a result through my thoughts without anything else changing.
Let's talk a little bit about, you've been podcasting for a while now, haven't you?
Gosh, yeah. January 2018. So 3.5 years.
How's that going? And tell us about some of your favorite guests you've had on, or some of the things you've learned through some of your podcasting.
Well, you're one of my favorite guests. We had an awesome discussion about confidence because I'm all into that. I literally just right before this interviewed Dean Karnazes. And so he's kind of like, maybe a lot of people won't know who he is, but he's kind of a legend in the ultra running world. And this is probably an example of manifestation in action now that I think about it, because I read his book 10 years ago when I was just starting to get into distance running. And I thought, oh, I'd really like to meet him someday. And fast forward, 10 years, and I got an email from his assistant saying, Dean's promoting his new book and he'd like to come on your podcast. I'm like, wait, what?
I love that.
Did that just happen? And then, yeah, lo and behold, like we just had a wonderful conversation. And I think, so that was super fun. And here's one of the big takeaways I had from that. So he's like the exact opposite of me as a runner, right? I am, very much larger bodied. I'm female. The only thing we have really in common is that we're both in our 50s, but I'm female, I'm larger bodied. I'm much, much slower. I've never run farther than, I've never done like these ultra marathons that he does. And then he's like, sort of elite athlete and like super fit. Like he's been voted like best body by Runner's World or so, I don't know, something like that. So we're polar opposites, but in the conversations that we were having about our experiences with running, I realized like, oh my gosh, like we are so much alike. Like mentally, the same thoughts that I use to get myself through a half marathon that I'm struggling with are the same ones that he uses to get himself through a 100-mile run. And so that was super powerful for me to realize like, here's this person that I've idolized and wanted to meet for many, many years, and finding that there was so much commonality. It was very empowering, I guess. It felt really good.
That reminds me of Lisa Nichols, who I interviewed, who was initially in the movie The Secret and the audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
And, all of those teachers are amazing and really changed my life back then, thinking about like creating and working with intention. And so I was able to interview her again, sort of like situation where you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea one day I'd actually be speaking to these people. And she actually revealed on the show something she's never revealed publicly and said so on the podcast. And I was like, ooh, what's happening here? And she revealed that while she was doing The Secret, she was struggling with hypothyroidism and had all these issues, and she carried great shame about it at the time, and wouldn't talk about it. And you would never know, right? I mean, maybe you would know, or you could guess, because she was larger then, and that could have been the reason she was larger, but still she was struggling. And so it was just so fascinating. Like, of all the times, I get her on the show and I'm like, oh, wow, I had no idea there'd be some big reveal. And so that was super cool as well. Like, just to be able to connect with anyone that you've been a fan of is so much fun. Tell us about some of your clients and some of the 180s in mindset that have happened. Like maybe someone came to you and they're like, I'm hopeless, I hate myself, or whatever, and some of the 180 turnarounds, because you're so encouraging. You're so, I'm all about like empowerment. So let's just talk a little bit about that and some of these empowerment examples around you in your life and with your clients.
Okay. So I have one of my favorite examples is a client that came to me. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I was running Facebook ads to a 5K class that I was teaching, and she saw one. And in that ad, I said, I can teach anybody to run. And at that point in time, she was she would have described herself as about 100 pounds overweight and not active at all. And she saw my ad and she said, I'm going to join her program so I can prove her wrong.
I love
and
this.
I know, right? And so fast forward a few years, and she's completed, I think, 2 marathons, and I can't count the number of half marathons, and she runs almost every day. And so, like, to me, that was a huge turnaround from somebody who was not only like, oh, I don't think I can be a runner, but like would go so far as to
like, this
hire...
chick's lying, and I'm going to go join her thing to prove to her that her advertisement is bullshit.
Exactly. And yeah, and I mean, it didn't happen overnight, but it was just a matter of like teaching her, to first of all, start with like, hey, we don't, you can actually just, this is the thing I teach all my clients, to say, just ask yourself, like, but what if I'm wrong about that? Right. So if you say like, I could never be a runner, like just introduce a little bit of doubt into your mind and say, but what if I'm wrong about that? What if that's not true? And that's kind of the way a lot of my clients sort of crack open the door to achieving more, because they've got this belief that I'm too fat, I'm too old, I'm too slow, like whatever. And I'll just be like, yeah, but what if you're wrong about that? And so then next thing you know, we just try a little bit of running, or, sometimes it's with strength training. I'll be like, maybe you just try to do a couple squats a day, right? Instead of saying that you can't do anything. So I think a lot of my clients have had that kind of transformation. The 5K one is the one that always makes me laugh the most. But yesterday I was actually, just yesterday, I was talking to a client. I'm taking a team of 32, there's 32 of us going to a trail race in Wisconsin in a couple weeks. It's a Ragnar relay, and we run basically through the night. We just keep like running on the trail, pass the baton to the next person, and so forth. And most of the women on the team are larger bodied. And one of them has been thinking to herself, I'm going to be the largest person there. And it's been like keeping her back from her training, because she thinks that to herself, I'm going to be the largest person there. And then she feels ashamed and defeated. And when she has those emotions in her body, of course, her, the things that she does are to hide and avoid and not really do her training. Because, contrary to popular belief, like shaming doesn't really get people to take action. And so when we shame ourselves, we don't take the action we want to take. We kind of hide from ourselves. And so she was sort of, by thinking I'm going to be the largest person there, I don't belong, I don't fit in, she was blocking herself from doing any of the training and from feeling connected to the team. So we did a little bit of coaching on that yesterday. And I'm like, okay, so what if you are the largest person there? Like, what if that's true? Like, why is that a problem? And she just kind of looked at me. We were doing it over Zoom. She's like, I don't know. Right. And so the whole argument fell apart. And so I think like a lot of the biggest transformations mentally that my clients have are when I just sort of like poke a little hole in their argument and they realize that it's just some sort of shitty societal belief that they've been holding on to. And they're like, oh, okay. And so now she's like, oh, I can't wait to go. It's going to be amazing.
And that's the way to enter into that type of event. Absolutely. With that mindset. What other physical activities do you like? You do some strength training or any sports? What are other things other than running, and maybe lifting some weights? What do you like to do?
Yeah. I mean, I'm really getting into lifting weights lately. Like I've got, my trainer is a professional power lifter. And so we're doing some fun stuff. So I've been doing a lot of that. And then when I'm not running, like once the race season is over, I'll probably spend more time on my Peloton. But other than that, I like to hike and go for a walk. And I'm not like I don't play group sports because I'm pretty uncoordinated. So I'm always the one on the team who drops the ball or trips and falls. So I just kind of stick to individual sports where I'm the only one who has to depend on myself.
And then do you subscribe to a particular eating paradigm of any kind?
Yes, I like to eat food that I enjoy. I would say that's probably it. I've tried a lot of different ways of eating that have actually felt really great in my body. I found them to be not as sustainable, mainly because, and this is probably mental work that I need to do. But I would always be like, oh, I feel so great when I don't eat flour and sugar, but then I miss flour and sugar. And that's an area probably that I could coach myself on. So short story is no. I subscribe to the eat food, not too much, and enjoy it.
Do you have, that like death row meal question, right? Like, what would that be for you?
Death row meal. Oh my gosh.
I think I'd want like 10 courses.
I know, right? It's like hard to pick one. I think Cheetos. I really do like Cheetos. Especially the white cheddar ones. So Cheetos, but Cheetos and ice cream. I think that might be it. And some Prosecco, really good Prosecco.
You could make like a root beer float, but with the Prosecco and the
there we go. I love that. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Like a new cocktail somewhere in about 2 weeks. What are some other mindset things or things that come up you'd like to share with our audience that you've learned through your own personal growth? Because you've done a lot of it, whether it's favorite speakers and teachers or whether it's things that really have shifted your life.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just never to believe my own bullshit. I mean, that's really it. Like whenever I find myself saying, I can't do that because, like, that's always my key to say, okay, that's probably wrong. And so it just kind of comes back to that question of like, what if I'm wrong about that? So I think in the years, I've probably been doing a lot of this mindset work for about 10 years. And I think that's the biggest lesson is just to not believe my own bullshit and not buy into my own story. And often to just ask other people like, hey, this is what I'm telling myself. Does that seem legit? And people are like, no, you're wrong.
Right. So. You're like, okay, thanks. Just needed that confirmation.
Yeah.
I mean, your life and what you do is an example that defies what people would think people would do. Yeah. That's what's so inspiring about it, because I think when people see like Not Your Average Runner, they see you, they're like, wait, what? And I like that. It kind of puts everybody in a like, hold on a minute, because most people I'm sure would be like, really? You're going to start teaching people how to run, or whatever. And you defied all of that. And that just shows too, there is a place for everybody, for all of your passions. You've made a life of it. I mean, what an incredible creation.
Yeah. I've had people say to me, what do you do for a living? And sometimes I'll say, oh, I'm a running coach. And sometimes just for fun, I'll be like, oh, I teach fat middle-aged women how to run. And because it's true, like it's legit what I do. And the looks on people's faces, they're like they can't compute that you can make a living and be happy and that there's enough people out there. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, so I it's fun to sort of break people's brains a little bit. By saying
you're really breaking the mold that way. And I love that, because it's just, again, and that's why I was so intrigued by you and your story too, because I was like, that's something like people would think would be impossible. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yet you've done it.
Yeah.
how can we work with you? Tell us what you offer. Tell us, we'll put everything in the show notes, but how can we connect with you? You've got Not Your Average Runner podcast. And then how can we work with you? Either you coach one-on-one, you coach groups, give us, what kind of programs you're offering and how we can benefit from your expertise here.
Okay. So I coach exclusively in groups because I want to be able to impact as many people as possible. And I run groups periodically throughout the year. So the best way to find out when the next group is running is to head over to my website, notyouraverage-runner.com. And you can sign up for the wait list. If there's not a group open, you can sign up for the wait list there. And then also I have a free training plan for anybody who wants to kind of try it out before they jump in with both feet. So there's a free training plan there that you can download to sort of, dip your toe in the water of running. And then also my podcast, I do a lot of running teaching and a lot of mindset teaching on my podcast. It does have an explicit rating. So I always warn people, don't listen with your kids in your car if you,
and I'm known for that too. Whenever I get interviewed, some people who know me, they're like, hey, could you not curse? And I'm always like, oh my God, what kind of reputation have I fucking created that, and there you go. Cause dropping F-bombs left and right. And, but you know what? It's like being real. It's who I am. It's how I talk. So, but I do, Disney family frenzy, I make it Disney friendly occasionally on podcasts when they don't want to say confident as fuck. So we do as F or as FU asterisk K. And sometimes it slips here and there, but so no kids in the car listening to your podcast, but please check it out. And then anything else you'd like to leave with our audience, either for larger bodied women or for people who are prejudiced against you or judgmental against, your body type. What can we do? What do we need to think about? And what can you imprint in our head to make us start to think differently? I don't think that way, but you know what I'm saying? Most of the world has judgments on this.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for people who have judgments against people who have larger bodies because either they feel it's unattractive or they feel like it's not healthy, I just want to say hey, check yourself, because my body's none of your business. Really, really isn't. And I would ask those people, why are you so concerned? Because if you're really concerned about my health, you'd probably take a different approach than just trying to shame me, and not me. I mean, the proverbial me, I guess, not me personally, but I think that is if you're somebody who believes that, that the ideal body is a certain way and that you need to be it is not my moral obligation to change my health to make other people happy. That always cracks me up when people are like, oh, but it's not healthy. And so what? Right.
Right. Or the people that have this fit, body that is what people think is the epitome of health, are Diet Coke, smoking cigarettes, doing some blow. I mean, there's other stuff, there's other vices. So they're living in a sort of a world of appearances. And so you got to check yourself that way too. You have to ask yourself, is there something I'm doing that could be, on the other side that someone could point the finger at me for, as well. And also just a general acceptance, right? Yeah. One of the things that, won't get into a whole pandemic discussion, because that's dicey. But one of the things that had bothered me about everyone making the terrain theory of getting healthier, because the comorbidities with the pandemic were, obesity or type 2 diabetes, things like that, which, hey, look, that's a great message in general, right? Hey, we don't want anyone to have type 2 diabetes. And it's definitely an inflammatory state, and great if you can get metabolically healthy. Awesome. But it's no different than Nancy Reagan back in the day being just say no to drugs. Did that fucking work? It doesn't work. You can't just tell a bunch of people hey, change your body, change your stuff right now. It's what that never works. You know what I mean? And so that bothered me a little bit coming from some of the people in the health industry, some of the sort of peripheral colleagues that I have in the paleo primal world who just pushing that. It's it's still a good message. Of course, it's always a good message to have people want to be healthier, but to say that would be the good luck with that. That's the say no to drugs. That's a quick turnaround. You're not also based in fucking reality when you say that. So it's a little bit of both, but you know what I mean? And so that was one of the things throughout the pandemic that made me go, are you guys not living in reality? Have you ever known someone who I've been there? It took me forever to quit smoking. It took me ever,
Yep.
we've all been through something that was maybe detrimental to us and not to say that your lifestyle is, but just on that note, that terrain theory. And then again, there's someone larger that could be metabolically way healthier. I interviewed Dr. Stephen Gundry on the old podcast Primal Blueprint, and he had talked about how he's like a heart surgeon. And he talked about how, these skinny working out, tennis playing wives would bring their, larger husbands in and they'd be like, he's a mess, da, 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 da. And he said he would always test their blood work too. And like 99% of the time, they were a mess. They were inflamed, even though they had the body that looked right. Right. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. So I think too, we have to have more empathy. I used to, back in the day, before I became hypothyroid and then had no control over my weight. I do now. I'm fixed in terms of, I'm on thyroid hormone. And of course I, have a normal metabolism. So if I do this, I'll get bigger. If I'm like any normal person now, but back then, in that pursuit of Hollywood and in that pursuit of that body and really injuring myself, so in the pursuit of health, I ended up becoming very unhealthy. That was one thing. And then also I did used to judge until it happened to me.
Yeah.
And, I think I am so empathetic now. So if I hear anyone judging someone like, oh God, look at those people, like they need to stop eating or something like that, I am quick to be like, hey, no, you have no idea what's going on in their life, their body. They could even have some sort of medical issue like I had where no matter what they do, it doesn't work, or they could just not care. I mean, either way, let's talk about full acceptance and empathy. And it's same thing too, before my arms got jacked up, I had really kind of no thoughts about people with disabilities. And now I am the most empathetic, aligned with that, and really have that a different sense. I feel something maybe more than the average person when I walk by and see someone in a wheelchair or see someone that has some sort of handicap of some kind. So I would just also say to the people out there judging, you might get that shit coming back at you karma wise. Be careful with that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I know that was a long rant, but
no, I mean, I think you said it all, right? You just never know when it's going to come back on you. And I think that like, as being a larger bodied person who, again, like we're slightly marginalized, not like I'm lucky that I'm not like, lucky's the wrong word. I shouldn't even said that, but like, I'm not in the body size that's like, people staring and pointing. And I mean, I don't know, maybe they are, and I just can't hear them, but I feel like I just totally forgot I was going to go with that.
That's right.
It
happens to me on tons of podcasts.
I have a little bit of menopause brain going on too. So, but you really said it all. Like, you just never know what's going on with somebody else. And so I think it's important for us to have just empathy in general for our fellow humans of like, hey, whatever they've got going on, like maybe they chose that, maybe they didn't. It's none of your fucking business. Like, bottom line.
Perfect.
Yeah.
None of your fucking business. Everyone listening, right? The less you care about what other people's opinions are of you, the happier and more confident you are going to be. It's just really the truth. And, we talked a lot about that, talking about confidence. What last words here from you? You are very confident. We've seen some of the ways through this episode, how you've become that. What are some tips maybe for other people who are maybe lacking in some self-esteem and confidence? I like the whole, like, maybe they're wrong, or maybe it's wrong, and questioning your own bullshit. Anything else or lasting tip or thought?
Yeah, one thing I tell all of my runners, but this applies to everybody, is like, nobody's actually looking at you. Like, I have so many of my runners that they say, oh, I can't wear a tank top because nobody wants to see my arms. I'm like, nobody fucking cares. Nobody's looking at your arms. And you know what? If they are, like, who cares, right? Like, are you going to change your actions because of somebody else's imaginary opinions? Are you going to let somebody else decide whether or not you get to wear a tank top? No, that's crazy. So like, confidence comes from recognizing that like other people's opinions really don't matter. And nobody cares anyway.
Yeah. And all that matters is what you think of yourself. And Angie, Jill Angie can help you with that. No, I just threw out your last name there. But yeah, so go to Not Your Average Runner, check out her podcast, check out her programs, and start to get confident and be empowered through her work. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll put everything to connect with you in the show notes. Is there a certain social media app that you're most active on versus others?
Just Instagram and Facebook, and I'm Not Your Average Runner on both of those.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Hey listeners, over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products. And I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.